Welcome to the Defiance Podcast. I'm flipping the script a little today and doing a new short-form Solosode. I just finished recording 11 interviews and wanted to reflect a little bit on what I've learned. I'm going to continue with the long form. I think that's a very important way to learn about things, but I think that putting a couple of these Solosodes where I just give a little bit of my own knowledge and maybe a 10 to 15 to 20 minute format, we'll see how that works out. So again, today I'm going to talk about what I've learned from the 11 podcasts that I have recorded, 10 of which I've published. First off, like anything else that we try and are new at, I've found that I sucked at it and still do. I ask questions awkwardly. I shoot camera angles the wrong way. I get the lighting wrong. My editing needs help. But guess what? I don't care. If I only did things I was good at, I'd still do nothing but lay on the floor and cry when I'm hungry. I love the challenge of something new, and I'm really enjoying getting better at this, and I thank those of you that are continuing to listen, and my promise to you is that I will continue to get better at this. So I've also learned that my friends are awesome for putting up with me taking time out of their busy day to explore their lives. I can't thank every single one of them enough for doing the interviews. I've gotten a lot of good feedback from those of you who have listened, and everybody is really interested in what the guests have to say. So I'll talk about each individual episode now. In the first episode, I learned from Stu Brower that if you don't own the IP behind your brand, you had better own some aspect of that brand or build your own brand. What courage he had to walk away from the CrossFit brand for this very reason and build his own brand, Urban Movement. If you haven't heard him talk about that, definitely you should listen to the first episode. He walked away from the brand CrossFit, which is about the biggest name in fitness right now, and decided to create his own brand, and he talks a lot about how that cost him revenue, but ultimately he's in control now of his company and its brand. In the second podcast, I learned from Maggie Williams that a competitor raising literally 40 times as much money as you did just a few weeks earlier, it's not the end of the world. She also taught me that a husband and wife combo startup founder team can indeed balance work and life. It just takes work. Listen to episode 2 if you don't believe me. I learned from Derek Wang in my third episode that an immigrant PhD student can go out on his own and create one of the fastest growing AI startups in the country, raise money from one of the top shelf private equity funds in the world, in spite of no formal business training. It's really an inspiring story. Again, that's episode 3 with Derek Wang from Stratified. David Watkins from Abbeydale taught me that there are very few absolutes in men's fashion, other than maybe that we should never wear a sports coat with an untucked shirt. David also taught me that men do want to dress nicely, as I had several people email me after the show and say they listened to every second of the interview. I think he even got a couple of orders out of that, so it was really good to hear. David runs a small business compared to some of the other businesses that I talked to, but there was definitely a lot of interest in that episode. Brian Bellamy taught me in the 4th episode that wisdom and polish aren't exclusive to 40-somethings and older. He's a 27-year-old now. He started and sold his first company to Foursquare while in undergrad and has since started 4 other companies. This episode was the first one I did for my constantly evolving home studio, incidentally. In my 6th interview, I interviewed Ben Simon from Windsor Jewelers. Much like my interview with David Watkins, I had several people approach me about how much they enjoyed hearing from Ben. He talked a lot about luxury watches, which is something that I'm very passionate about, and so I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. And much like David Watkins' approach to building a wardrobe, Ben took an approach to building a watch collection that I would classify as pragmatic, practical, and open-minded. And actually, Stu had the same approach to fitness, so maybe I've discovered a theme that I should practice more often in my own business. Next, I interviewed my good friend Austin Rosenfeld from his home in Dallas in episode 7, And I feel like this was the most conversational podcast I've recorded yet. It helps that we're longtime friends since high school, and also that he runs a business that I understand in a very meaningful way. But it was also fascinating to hear about the early days of Appian, which is now a publicly traded company that he was an early employee at. And then he built a services business that leveraged his relationship with the executive team at Appian. I think that it's a really interesting story, and I hope if you haven't had a chance to listen that you do so. Next up was Chad Stackowicz for my 8th interview, and I learned a lot about where Cisco and VoIP are going. Hint, it's to the cloud. And I also got to hear a lot about blockchain and also about running a local political campaign while trying to steer a fast-growing tech company. Chad talked about that and a lot of other things. A really dynamic guy, and I think you'll enjoy that interview as well. Incidentally, he also told me about the HBO miniseries Chernobyl. Damn, if you haven't watched it yet, do so. You can thank Chad and you can thank me. It's a great show. At my 9th interview, I spoke with Scott Lean, who is a longtime mentor of mine who invested in one of my earlier companies and taught me a lot at the time about building digital products. He's achieved fabulous success with his product, GrandPad, now available in Target and Best Buy, and you've probably seen commercials if you watch any shows on cable, CNN, HGTV, that sort of thing. You should definitely check it out, especially if you have any super senior family members. His product is making it possible for families to reconnect with their 80 and 90-year-old members in ways that were impossible until his product came along. He gives a great demo. I posted a video of the demo to the YouTube channel. You should really check it out if you have any seniors in your family that you're finding it difficult to talk to as often as you would like to. Also, his insights on products are brilliant, and I think anybody working at a large company on products will be inspired by his transition from working at companies like Target and Best Buy and Intuit and Bank of America, and then going out on his own and raising a bunch of money and building a very successful company. In my 10th interview with Ben Harrison from DealCloud, first and foremost, I learned how hard it is to get Blanton's. We have a tradition of drinking whiskey on the shows, and he requested ahead of time Blanton's as his whiskey of choice. I had no idea how hard it is to get Blanton's. I did order some, but it didn't come in time for the show, so I apologize to Ben for that. In spite of this, though, I enjoyed his story a lot as he made the rare transition from being a banker and a private equity analyst to successfully launching a SaaS platform that ended in a highly successful exit to Intap, and now they're just kicking ass. And hearing his story was really inspirational for me, and I think the people that hear that episode will come to the same conclusion. In my 11th installment, which Taylor and I are working on editing as we speak but haven't yet published, I interviewed Greg Brown. He owns a company called Cardinal Finance that does fractional CFO work, but also he's the head of the Charlotte Angel Fund. And Greg talked a lot about the inner workings of angel investing and gave just some awesome perspective on how our local Charlotte startup scene fits into the overall vitality of the city. His insights, again, I can't say enough. We're just really, really smart, really well thought out. I think that anybody who is involved in a startup will like to hear what he has to say, both about being an angel investor, but also just building an ecosystem and some of the pitfalls and challenges in doing that. Again, I haven't published that yet, but I'm hoping to in the next couple of days here. So, again, in reflecting on all of these, I really want to interview every single one of these people again, mainly so I can do a better job and do just a little more justice to the energy, innovation, and grit they bring to their respective professions and companies, but also because I thoroughly enjoyed the discussions with them. And even though the interviews are pretty long, they range from an hour and a half to 2.5 hours, we don't get the whole story. So I do intend to re-interview every single one of them multiple times, especially as new announcements come up. I've got a great roster of guests lined up for the next 5 or 6 that are already scheduled. Probably another 5 or 6 beyond that I hope to get scheduled. I said when I started this that I wanted to maintain a pace of 1 or 2 interviews per week. It's probably been closer to 2 or 3. it may settle into one or two, but I do intend to keep doing these, and I also intend to lay out a couple of these solosodes, as I'm calling this, as well. I hope you enjoyed this recap. I've mentioned before I plan to stick with the long-form interviews with founders and investors, but I also intend to layer in shorter form ones like this. I solicited some feedback on social media with about 9 or 10 topics, and this was the first one that I wanted to cover, but I'm going to try and do one of these every week or two on top of the 1 or 2 interviews that I bring you every week. As always, please share any feedback you have. Please subscribe to the podcast on whatever podcasting software you use. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you know any great founders, I'm always looking to grow my network and reach out to them. So please do reach out. Thanks again. Cheers.